Philadelphia, 1971. The air was thick with anticipation as Joe Frazier threw rapid combinations at the heavy bag, each punch landing with devastating force. Sweat poured down his face, but his concentration never wavered. At 31 years old, Frazier was at the peak of his powers, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. His compact frame housed extraordinary strength, his left hook already legendary in boxing circles. But today, his usual stone-faced demeanor had given way to something darker. The radio in the corner of Clyde Lomax's gym blared with Muhammad Ali's latest interview, where he called Frazier an Uncle Tom and too ugly to be champion. Frazier stopped mid-combination, his chest heaving as Ali's taunting voice filled the gym. The words cut deep, deeper than any punch he had ever taken. Born to sharecroppers in Beaufort, South Carolina, Frazier had escaped poverty through sheer determination. He had worked in slaughterhouses to support his family while training. He had earned every victory, every dollar, every ounce of respect. And now this man, this loudmouth who'd changed his name and refused to fight for his country, was questioning not just his boxing ability, but his very identity, his blackness, his dignity. Before I continue, I need to ask you something. This channel only exists because of you. You're important to me, and I know you value stories told with soul. If you feel something genuine just from this beginning, subscribe now. Seriously. It costs you nothing, but means everything to me, who creates each story with love. "Turn that off," Frazier growled to his assistant. The young man scrambled to silence the radio, but the damage was already done. The words had sunk in, fueling a resentment that had been building for years. What most fans didn't realize was that Frazier had once considered Ali a friend. When Ali, then known as Cassius Clay, had been stripped of his title and boxing license for refusing to be drafted into military service during the Vietnam War, it was Frazier who had loaned him money. Frazier who had advocated for his return to boxing. Frazier who had stood by him when many others wouldn't. And how had Ali repaid that loyalty? With mockery, with cruel nicknames like the Gorilla, with relentless psychological warfare designed to sell tickets and elevate his own status as a cultural icon. Every press conference became a stage for Ali's particular brand of theater, with Frazier cast as the villain, the establishment fighter, the white man's champion. Despite the fact that Frazier had grown up in far more challenging circumstances than Ali, who came from a relatively stable middle-class background in Louisville. The first time they met in the ring, the fight billed as the fight of the century at Madison Square Garden, Frazier had emerged victorious. For 15 brutal rounds, they had tested each other's limits, with Frazier's punishing left hook ultimately sending Ali to the canvas in the final round. The unanimous decision victory should have settled things, should have earned him respect. Instead, Ali dismissed it as a fluke. The taunts continued, more vicious than ever. Their rematch at Madison Square Garden in 1974 went Ali's way, though Frazier and many observers believed the decision was questionable. Then came the Thrilla in Manila in 1975, their third and final meeting, fought in the sweltering heat of the Philippines. That fight transcended sport, becoming something primal. After 14 rounds of unimaginable brutality, with both men at the brink of physical collapse, Frazier's trainer Eddie Futch stopped the fight against his fighter's wishes. "It's all over, but no one will forget what you did here today," Futch told him. In his victory interview, Ali admitted, "It was the closest I've come to death." But even that shared crucible wasn't enough to heal the rift between them. The personal insults, the racial dimensions of Ali's taunting, they had cut. too deep. As Frazier told reporters years later, "I hated that man. God may forgive him, but I won't." For the next 30 years, Joe Frazier nursed his grudge against Muhammad Ali. Even as Ali's health declined due to Parkinson's disease, Frazier's bitterness remained intact. "He's got what he deserved," Frazier said in an interview in 1996, to the shock of the reporter. Frazier's friends and family worried that this hatred was consuming him, defining him not as the great champion he was, but as the man who couldn't forgive Muhammad Ali. If this story has already made you feel something, however small it may be, don't leave without giving back. Comment and subscribe now. New York City, 2001. Joe Frazier sat in his hotel room, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. At 57, his face bore the marks of his career: the slightly flattened nose, the scar tissue around his eyes, the permanent swelling along his jawline. He had come to attend a sports memorabilia convention, one of the many ways former champions supplemented their income in retirement. Tomorrow, he would sit at a table, signing photos of his greatest moments for fans who increasingly needed reminders of who he was. That was the cruel reality that gnawed at Frazier daily. Despite his impressive record, 32 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw with 27 knockouts, despite holding the heavyweight championship, despite beating Ali in the biggest boxing match in history, he remained in Ali's shadow. When people discussed the great heavyweights, Ali always came first. Ali was the cultural icon, the self-proclaimed greatest of all time. Frazier was the footnote, the foil, the man who lost 2 out of 3. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his daughter Jackie, calling to check on him. "How you feeling, Dad?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I'm all right, baby," Frazier replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Financial troubles had plagued him since retirement. The gym he opened in Philadelphia struggled to stay afloat. His boxing career had left him with chronic pain and health issues, and the bitterness, that hadn't subsided with time. "Did you see the Sports Illustrated article?" Jackie asked hesitantly. Frazier grunted in acknowledgement. The magazine had run a feature on Ali's battle with Parkinson's disease, portraying him as a tragic hero, the greatest fighter of all time, now fighting his greatest battle. It was a moving piece, but it had rekindled Frazier's resentment. "They make him out to be a saint," Frazier muttered. "Nobody remembers what he did, what he said, how he treated me." There was silence on the line. Jackie had heard this before, had lived with her father's pain and anger. She had seen how it affected him, how it sometimes seemed to define him more than his achievements. "Dad," she said finally, "I saw a clip of him on TV yesterday. He can barely talk now, can barely move." "And?" Frazier's voice was hard. "And nothing. Just, life's too short, you know?" After hanging up, Frazier couldn't shake Jackie's words. He pulled out a worn newspaper clipping from his wallet. A photo of Ali lighting the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996. Ali's hands had trembled violently as he held the flame, his once beautiful body betraying him. But his face had shown determination, courage. The world had watched in awe, many in tears. Frazier had watched too, telling a reporter afterward that Ali should have fallen into the cauldron. He had regretted those words almost immediately. They didn't reflect who he wanted to be, who his parents had raised him to be. But pride had prevented him from taking them back. Pride. That double-edged sword that had made him a champion, but now kept him chained to old grievances. The next day at the convention, a young fan approached his table with an unusual request. "Mr. Frazier, I have a photo I was hoping both you and Muhammad Ali could sign. He's at the other end of the hall. Frazier stiffened. Ali's here? The fan nodded, not registering Frazier's change in demeanor. Yes, sir. There's a huge line, but it's moving pretty fast. For a moment, Frazier considered refusing, but something, curiosity perhaps, or something deeper, made him agree. I'll sign it. Bring it back when he's done his part. Throughout the day, Frazier's mind kept returning to the fact that Ali was just a few hundred feet away. It had been years since they'd been in the same room. What would Ali look like now? What would he say? If he could still speak properly, would he remember the cruelty, the mockery, the calculated psychological warfare? As the convention wound down, Frazier made a decision that surprised even himself. He would go see Ali. Walking toward Ali's section of the convention hall, Frazier felt his heart pounding, as it had before fights. Security personnel recognized him immediately and moved to clear a path. But Frazier waved them off. He wanted no special treatment, no announcement of his presence. From a distance, he spotted Ali, seated behind a table. The once mighty heavyweight. Champion looked diminished, his movements slow and methodical as he signed autographs with a trembling hand. An assistant helped guide each item in front of him, another wiped his brow occasionally, but despite his physical limitations, Ali's eyes remained bright, engaging with each fan who approached. Frazier hesitated, nearly turning back. Then Ali looked up and saw him. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something Frazier couldn't quite read. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. Their eyes locked across the crowded space. Two warriors who had pushed each other to the limits of human endurance, who had shared a bond forged in blood and sweat that no one else could fully understand. Moving slowly through the crowd, Frazier approached the table. The fans parted, sensing the significance of the moment. As he reached Ali, a silence fell over the immediate area. Joe! Ali's voice was barely audible, a whisper of its former booming self. Muhammad. Frazier nodded, his face giving away nothing. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, decades of history hanging between them. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, including his own security team, Frazier extended his hand. Ali reached out slowly, his hand shaking with the effort, and clasped Frazier's. The simple gesture sent ripples through the convention hall. Phones came out. Flashbulbs popped. But in that small space between them, something private was happening. A conversation without words between two men who had defined each other's lives. You look good, Frazier said, not letting go of Ali's hand. Ali smiled slightly, then with visible effort leaned forward. You, too, he managed. Then, with a mischievous glint in his eye that reminded Frazier of the young Cassius Clay, he added, still ugly, though. For a split second, Frazier stiffened. Then, seeing the playful look in Ali's eyes, he did something that shocked those who knew him best. He laughed, a genuine, deep laugh that seemed to release something long held tight within him. And you still talk too much, he replied, squeezing Ali's hand gently before releasing it. That brief exchange, witnessed by hundreds but truly understood by only the two men involved, marked the beginning of a thaw in their decades-long Cold War. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't erasing the past, but it was acknowledgement of their shared history, of their unbreakable connection, of their mortality. As Frazier walked away, he felt lighter somehow. That night, he called Jackie. I saw him, he said simply. Ali? She asked, surprised. Yeah, he's bad off, Jackie. Real bad. What happened? Did you talk to him? Frazier was quiet for a moment. Not much to say, but I shook his hand. The silence on the other end told him his daughter understood the magnitude of that simple act. For Joe Frazier, who had nursed his grievances like precious possessions, shaking Muhammad Ali's hand was more than a gesture. It was a first step toward something he had never thought possible. What happened next would astonish not just Jackie, but everyone who thought they knew Joe Frazier. Philadelphia, 2002. Joe Frazier sat in his modest office above Joe Frazier's gym on North Broad Street, reviewing the bills piling up on his desk. The gym, once a thriving center for young boxers in Philadelphia, was struggling financially. Frazier had poured his boxing earnings into the place, seeing it as his legacy. A chance to give kids from backgrounds like his an opportunity to make something of themselves through boxing. The phone rang, interrupting his calculations. It was Bryant Gumbel's office, inviting him to appear on HBO's Real Sports for a segment they were doing on Muhammad Ali. "What do they want me to say?" Frazier asked warily. "They want your perspective on your rivalry, your fights," the producer explained, "and your reaction to his current condition." Frazier was silent for a long moment. Since their brief encounter at the convention, he had found himself thinking about Ali often. Not the taunting, provocative Ali who had caused him so much pain, but the diminished figure he had seen, still proud, still with that spark in his eyes, but trapped in a body that betrayed him a little more each day. "I'll do it," Frazier said finally. When the HBO crew arrived at his gym the following week, they set up in the ring. The same ring where Frazier still trained local kids, still showed them the perfect left hook that had once felled the great Ali. The interview started predictably, with questions about their 3 legendary fights, about the intensity of their rivalry. Then Gumbel asked, "Joe, over the years, you've made no secret of your feelings about Muhammad Ali, about the things," he said, "the way he treated you. Do you still feel that way?" The cameras captured the complexity of emotions crossing Frazier's face. The old hurt, the pride, something new emerging. "Look," Frazier began slowly, "what happened between me and Ali? It was personal. He took it too far. Said things that cut deep." He paused, then continued. "But seeing him now, man wasn't meant to live that way, especially not someone like him. I wouldn't wish that on nobody." Gumbel pressed further. "So, you've forgiven him?" Frazier looked directly into the camera. "I'm working on it," he said honestly. "The Lord says you need to forgive to be forgiven. I'm trying to live right." What the cameras didn't capture was what happened after the interview. Frazier asked the producer to stay behind. He had something he wanted to say, something he wanted recorded, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for it to be public yet. "I've been thinking," Frazier said, once the crew had reset. "All these years, I've been angry because people don't remember my victories, don't give me my due. They all worship Ali. But maybe that's not on Ali. That's just how the world works. He was larger than life. I was just me, a fighter, doing my job." He took a deep breath before continuing. "And the truth is, boxing needs Muhammad Ali, not just for what he did in the ring, but for making people care about the sport. Without him, without our fights, would anyone still be talking about boxing? About me? I owe him for that." The producer was visibly moved. "Joe, would you be willing to say this on camera? For the segment?" Frazier shook his head. "Not yet. But there's something else I want to do." 2 weeks later, Frazier shocked his closest friends by announcing that his gym would host a fundraiser for the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center. When asked why, his answer was simple. Because it's the right thing to do. The event was small by celebrity standards, but significant for what it represented. Frazier invited local fighters, trainers, boxing fans. He auctioned off memorabilia from his career, including signed gloves from the Thrilla in Manila. He spoke briefly, without prepared remarks, his words coming straight from the heart. "Boxing's a tough sport," he told the gathered crowd. "We hit each other for a living. But outside the ring, we're all part of the same family. Muhammad and me, we made history together. Now he's fighting a different kind of fight, and it ain't one anybody should face alone." The event raised over $100,000 for Parkinson's research. Not a huge sum by national fundraising standards, but an extraordinary amount for a small gym in Philadelphia. More important than the money was the message. Joe Frazier, after decades of bitterness, had found his way to something like peace. When Ali learned of the fundraiser, he sent Frazier a private message through their mutual friend, Gene Kilroy. "You always were a champion, Joe." The two men never fully reconciled in the way of Hollywood endings. The hurt ran too deep. The history was too complex. But in the years that followed, Frazier spoke of Ali with increasing respect and even affection. In interviews, he focused more on their great fights, on their shared legacy, than on the personal slights. When asked about his change of heart by a young boxer at his gym, Frazier's answer revealed the wisdom he had earned through his long, difficult journey. Holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I carried that hate for too long. Nearly destroyed me. Sometimes the bravest thing a fighter can do is lay down his gloves. Joe Frazier died in November 2011 from liver cancer, having made his peace not just with Ali, but with his place in boxing history. Not as a footnote to Ali's greatness, but as the man who brought out the best in the greatest, who pushed him to heights neither could have reached alone. Their trilogy of fights stands as testament to what humans can endure, what they can achieve, and ultimately how even the bitterest rivalries can give way to respect and reconciliation. Muhammad Ali, despite his advanced Parkinson's, attended Frazier's funeral. No cameras were allowed inside the church, but those present reported that Ali approached Frazier's casket slowly, with assistance, and stood in silent tribute to his greatest rival and unwitting partner in immortality. In boxing, as in life, the final bell eventually rings for everyone. Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, once bitter enemies, found in the twilight of their lives what had eluded them in their prime. The understanding that they had shaped each other, defined each other, and ultimately needed each other to achieve the greatness for which both will always be remembered. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back. Comment. Subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.